Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Catholic Education Foundation podcast. This podcast will feature Dr. Daryl Hagan of the Catholic University of America, along with Catholic Education Foundation President Rich Lecklider. And once again, thank you for joining our podcast. Daryl, okay, now let me read this. So I'm going to get your title right here. So you're the director of the Institution for the Transformation of Catholic Education at the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C.
That is correct.
Wow, did I get all that right?
That's a big business card.
Which is
It
It's
is.
a long business card.
That is, man. Wow. Well, Daryl, welcome to the show. All the way from Washington, D.C. We're so excited that you're with us today because we want our audience to learn more about the works that you are of making Catholic education better. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for being. I'm happy to be here. Happy to be here.
Daryl, tell us about yourself, your family, and your education.
All right. Well, if you can hear it in the voice, I'm not from Washington, D.C. I'm from Kentucky.
I love it.
Which is why I'm so happy to be here and to support the good work of the foundation. So I grew up in Henderson, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And
We know Henderson.
We know Henderson well.
right down the street.
Yeah, we know them well.
I have a wonderful family that I'm so proud of. My wife, Jill. I have two adult children, Max and Margaret. And Margaret went through 12 or 13 years of Catholic education. Max went through 16 years of Catholic education.
That's great.
Very proud of that. And Max is married to Lauren, and we have, if you're a grandparent, you know we have the greatest gift that you can ever have. I have a granddaughter, Lily, who is, by the way, started Catholic schools in Indianapolis, St. Luke Catholic School, and identical twin grandsons that are almost 2 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
They got a growing family.
Growing family, and it's really exciting to see that faith go generational.
Yep.
You know, from me to my son, from my son to his children.
You bet.
It's beautiful.
You
beautiful.
bet.
Daryl, before we get into kind of the script here, I want to ask you a question. So obviously you have some children that have been through a lot of Catholic education. And one of the phrases Rich always uses is it's not a sacrifice, it's an investment. There's no better investment than to give your kids a Catholic education. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And my wife and I reap the benefits of that partnership that where our family who chose to raise our children in the Catholic faith and tradition, we partnered with our Catholic parish through Catholic education. And today, my children are active in their parishes. They're passing the sacraments on to their children.
That's right.
And it really is a beautiful thing for me to stand back at this age and witness. It's really not a sacrifice. And I would actually encourage us not to say that to parents. I know it was a tagline there for a long time, Rich, where you would say, oh my gosh, you know, let's talk about that sacrifice. It's really an honor to be able to place our children in the school that we as parents expect for us. And that's why school choice is so important in this United States, because it shouldn't matter where your zip code is in order to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Obviously, Rich, that's your thing. And I'm sure you agree with Daryl there.
Yeah, I think the sacrifice notion was something that was used a lot when I was younger by my parents in that generation. I think it was more around sacrifice, giving, and other kinds of words like that. But I think Daryl's spot on. I think it's a privilege to be in a Catholic school,
That's right?
It's certainly not a requirement. It's a privilege. And for those that are lucky enough to have that gift, it changes everything. So in that regard, I have 4 children of my own, and I can't think of any better investment I'd ever make in my life for them than that.
Agreed.
So, Daryl, why did you decide on a career path that's in education?
You know, growing up, I did feel called to work with children. And to be honest with you, when I first started in college, I thought it was going to be child psychology. And I was heading down that road, and But then being a naive, 19-year-old, 18-year-old, whatever, you had to learn the full scope of the human person, right?
Right.
So your classes weren't just about students.
Sure.
And I was like, but I want to talk about students. I want to learn about students. And so from that challenge, I have a lot of courses in psychology and sociology. I have a minor in it because I was heading so far down that road. But I then just switched to education.
Okay.
And I felt the presence. It's easy to look back now and know what God was asking for me and how I could serve our church. But back then, I think I was just kind of blindly going and thinking it was blind, but it really wasn't. And I ended up being offered this great opportunity to teach in a Catholic school, and the rest is history.
Wow. So because you were in the Diocese of Owensboro,
Correct.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, my first job was offered at Christ the King Catholic School in Madisonville, Kentucky, and I was like, "Yes, I will."
That's awesome. Love it.
Well, so we were talking before we started here, and it's pretty incredible the things that you've done in the Catholic education field. It's insane. So tell your listeners a little bit about your journey, kind of through that whole, from being a teacher to a principal to the director of school, the whole thing. It's crazy.
It really is, and I will tell you, looking back, it all makes sense. But living through it was quite a journey for my wife and I. I want to teach. I was excited to be a teacher. Even after the very first year, there was a challenge with the principal leaving, and they said, "Hey, Daryl, maybe you can be the principal."
After year one.
And I said, "I'm just trying to get through algebra."
Right.
And at fifth period, no. But then, those seeds were planted.
Yep.
When people are saying that. And so, I was a teacher, and I consider myself a teacher still to this very day. And not that I needed more titles, I am also a professor in the Department of Education at the university. So I'm going back to my original roots a little bit as well when I have time. But I was a teacher in a very small school. And then I went to Holy Name of Jesus Catholic School in Henderson, Kentucky, which is where I was a student as well.
Oh, okay.
All those years. And I thought I would never leave there. And I was a teacher. I was happy. And then I get an invitation from a pastor to be principal in Union County, Kentucky. And they were desperate. I promise you, this had nothing to do with me, more about what they needed. And I just kept saying yes. And shocking each time somebody would ask me to do something. And so now I wake up after 5 years of teaching and find myself being principal of a small Catholic school. Then I get...
When you say small, what kind of numbers?
200, 220.
Okay.
It was a preschool through 8th in Union County, Morganfield, Kentucky.
Small but healthy.
Yeah, it really is. It was a great opportunity. Had no idea what I was doing. That wasn't the requirement at the time. It was just, he said yes, that was the requirement. And so I do that, and I think that went well because then the diocese calls me and says, "We want you to move to Owensboro, Kentucky and be the director of the Owensboro Catholic Consolidated School System." One of the things I did was change the name to Owensboro Catholic Schools because that name was way too long. And so I went from being an administrator in one school, or 200, to being part of the director of 7 schools with 2,400 students, and was just, I don't know. Again, I thought this was what Jesus was calling me to. And then Holy Name School, which the administration never opens up. It opens up after being director for 4 years. I just always wanted to be the principal of my elementary school, always.
And that's a pretty big school, right?
It is. It had when I left, it had 630 students.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
That's
pretty good size.
You bet.
And we got to move back home, and it was just where remember, I was a teacher there for 2 years,
right?
And I just wanted to get back there. And people were like, you're going backwards. And I'm like, no, I promise you this is. And I was there for 13 years, and the people, the team, the parish, the pastor, the parents, it was on fire. The mission was alive, and it was phenomenal. And I thought I was doing that the rest of my life. I was there, like I said, for 13 years, and then after church one day, a family comes up to my wife and I and says, "We have a job for you." And I said, "I don't want a job. I have a job. Love my job, and it's a ministry." And they said, "We want you to be the superintendent of the Diocese of Evansville, Indiana." I said, "I don't know anything about that. I don't." But anyway, again, seeds were planted.
Yeah.
A year later,
You said yes again.
I said, "I'll go talk." It was very interesting.
Gotcha.
Bishop Gettelfinger, God bless his soul. I thought I was just going over to talk. He was ready to get me to start that day, and I do interview, and But yes, I said yes ultimately, and so now I find myself as the superintendent of the Diocese of Evansville, Indiana. 26 Catholic schools, 7,200 students, and was there for 12 years, and really loved those Catholic schools in southwestern Indiana.
Which is a long time for a superintendent of schools.
It is a very long time. We have to take care of our Catholic school superintendents. 26% of them left the area of their current position last year. 1 out of every 4 in the United States left.
Wow.
The average time there is 3 years. It's not very long for a whole host of reasons. But so, yeah.
Man, what a journey.
So you've learned to be a really good manager of people, right? You start out in a classroom teaching a subject, and you had to morph into somebody that could manage a lot of people, professional people. I mean, that's a big deal there, particularly at a young age, in my view.
You know, Rich, absolutely. And I would say it really is relational. Everything in our ministry says we have to be relational. And so you have to meet people where they're at and then walk them toward the gospel. And sometimes people get hung up and they stop after the first half of that. So you do have to meet people where they're at and then move them toward the gospel. And I think that has helped me. And I do understand what the importance of that, of being relational with people and walking with them. And I think it's critical for anybody that works in the church.
Absolutely critical. You know, Rich, the foundation's all about families gaining access to Catholic education, you know, that they may not be able to afford, right? But how much time and effort goes into talking to families about why they want a Catholic school for their children?
Yeah, it's a good question. We are in the access business primarily. We're not teaching kids in classrooms, but we're trying to sort of get them there. And people come to us from a variety of angles, right? We may get a call today from a mom whose kid is in the 3rd grade at XYZ school and is really, really stumbling, really struggling, may have some social issues, this and that. There's all kinds of reasons. And it's typically a mom that'll call, and she isn't sure. She may not even know about Catholic schools and what that means, what that community is all about.
Sure.
But she's heard from people, hey, you ought to check out St. Stephen Martyr or St. Patrick. And so sometimes we're a conduit for that. So people come to us, they obviously have an access problem because they can't afford it, but they also want to learn, well, here's where I'm at, here's where I think I want to go. Does that sort of make sense? And what we always tell them is, look, before you come to us, we're happy to help you. We're going to help you. But you got to go visit the school, meet the principal, meet the assistant principal, meet a couple teachers, walk the halls. You got to see if it feels right. And I think when parents do that, they get a really awesome sense of community about, you can kind of feel it when you walk through a building. Anytime I visit a school, and Daryl, you've done this a million times, and all you got to do is walk through it about a half hour to an hour, and you kind of know what you got, and there's a feel to it, and it either kind of feels right or it doesn't. And so that fit's really important for a family that's just entering into that community. And we spent a lot of time doing that. Obviously, we're on the financial side mostly, but we encourage people to number one, sort of be careful, okay? You have choices among schools. You don't just have to go to this school or just that one. So sort of be thoughtful about it and take your time about it. And, most of the time we get it right in terms of what I call the fit.
That's right.
Yeah. So that's
a great answer.
It's what makes it really cool between what we do and what our schools do. I mean, again, they're the destination, not us.
And Rich, I'll jump in here and say, I hear Ascension is a really good Catholic school.
Yeah, well.
It is indeed.
It is. It is. Daryl knows I know all about that one.
I hope that doesn't get edited out.
No, hey, that's going to stay in there. So, Daryl, obviously you worked for 24 years in the Diocese of Owensboro and another 12 in the Diocese of Evansville, so nearly 40 years. I'm curious, what did you experience in terms of the evolution of Catholic education during your career?
I think several things, actually. Catholic schools have remained true to their mission during this time. I think it has evolved in various ways, but I think we've been true to the mission of Catholic education. But I think in terms of curriculum and effective scientific pedagogy, which is, how to teach, I think we have done a better job of that today. I think we understand how to train our teachers better today than we did when Daryl back in the early 80s was around and just hoping and praying that it went well. I also think we understand Catholic schools exist to educate the full flourishing of the human person. And I think we understand more about the human person today, more so, and the special needs or exceptional needs of so many students. And that's not necessarily just autism or just ADHD, but I'm talking all types of exceptional needs. And I think we didn't discuss that. There wasn't any way to help students back then. It just wasn't discussed. It was, you just come in, sit down, and do what you're asked. And so I think we've really grown in that way over the course of time.
That's very interesting. We were talking a little bit before the show as well about how COVID was kind of how you navigated that whole deal as your role superintendent. But you also said something that was kind of interesting to me. You said there was no way to give students a Catholic school experience with NTI.
Again, to anyone that's listening, that is my opinion, and I own that opinion. And we chose in our diocese, based on my recommendation, not to offer any full-time technology, because if we're forming children in the faith, I've yet to see or been convinced that can be done through a computer screen. Because we come together, we're called to be in community, and I don't know how one does that when you're really talking about the full flourishing, not part of the full flourishing of a human being, but the full flourishing of that human being.
Yeah, look, we had the same kind of issue in the
Archdiocese
of Louisville.
Sure did.
In June of 2020, right? And we're trying to figure out which way we're going to pivot here. And Archbishop Kurtz, to his full credit, along with our school office, decided that we're going to go back in person on a regular schedule. We're going to do what it takes to be safe as best we can.
Absolutely.
But we're going back, and that was at the time that was a fairly controversial decision.
Right.
It got a lot of press.
Right.
The politicians got involved, as you can imagine, and it was sort of an uproar for a while. So there was pressure on our school office, on the Archbishop, and sort of this view that may not be the right move for lots of different reasons. And thanks be to God, it proved to be one of the best decisions he ever made in his life.
Yeah.
And the impact that decision had for the next 2 years,
correct,
as people kind of worked through COVID, was unbelievable. And I'm really proud of that. I think part of our success today as a foundation, and I think clearly part of our success of our schools in terms of growing enrollment, is really about the commitment that was made in 2020 that we're going to get back to business, because we know, to your point, the opposite's not going to work.
That's right.
That's right. And I'll even share with you, we too, in the Diocese of Evansville, even though it was contrary to what happened in the local public school system, who changed their mind at the last minute, we moved forward. If you fast forward a year later, the Diocese of Evansville had the top. We take the state assessment, so we're comparing apples to apples with every student in the state of Indiana, and our Catholic schools ranked the highest in like science in 5th grade, in 7th grade, in 2nd grade, or math and reading. I'm like, it was phenomenal, and people were like, "Oh my gosh, look what you did!" And I said, "Well, I didn't do anything. Those classroom teachers and those parents met those challenges, like you said, Rich, safely, but they showed up. They showed up for our kids.
That's right.
They did what needed to be done. They kept the kids safe, but they taught them. And so that's how we rose. We were always near the top, but for that one year, we were at the very top in many of those categories out of the entire state. And it was just a credit to those hardworking teachers and principals.
Well, and a credit to you, too. I mean, you guys had to make some tough decisions to send those kids back to school.
Correct.
Yeah, look, there was a lot more. You kind of forget about it, 4 or 5 years later. The amount of social pressure around that whole topic was enormous.
Sure.
Okay? And that's, you not only had to worry about what you thought the right decision was, but how to deal with sort of the aftermath of that. Yeah. In terms of the heat.
Well, I actually wrote an article that appeared in NCEA, the National Catholic Education Association's magazine, and it was Catholic schools leading in a pandemic, because that's what we did across this entire nation.
Oh, yeah.
Catholic schools led education during that pandemic.
It's really historic. It's very historic.
Yes, it was historic.
Well, let's talk about that writing a little bit. So you're an accomplished author. Talk about that part of your career.
Yeah, so Rich kind of mentioned this a few minutes ago about being relational and the importance of my work there. And so when I got my doctorate from Western Kentucky University, there's a shout out for
Go Hilltoppers.
Go Hilltoppers. And I wanted to do research, of course, with Catholic schools. I wanted to do it with building engagement. And so I wrote a book called Communion and Community, 46 Ways to Engage Catholic School Faculty and Staff During the School Year. And yes, it's filled with all these things to do, but it's the why that matters. It's why do you want the principals to do this with your teachers? There's a way to have an effective faculty meeting. There's in the back. Because we know that teacher engagement doesn't mean teacher satisfaction. And I think a lot of people think it's the same, but teacher satisfaction only indicates how happy or content a teacher is at school. Well, I might be happy doing nothing at school, and I could be happy doing that all day long if I was the right person. So it doesn't address their level of motivation, involvement, or emotional commitment to Catholic schools. But teacher engagement is the extent to which teachers feel passionate about their ministry, are committed to the church, and they put discretionary effort into their classes, schools, and parishes. And so I always ask that question, how engaged are your teachers? Because in Catholic schools, the secret sauce is they're all in. And
Correct.
So we need to know, how do you build engagement with Catholic school teachers? How do you do that? And this book addresses that.
Daryl, how do you combat, and I'm just going to, address the elephant in the room here. How do you combat the major, at least I'm not sure how it was in your the schools that you were in charge of, but here in the Archdiocese, there's a major wage gap between the public schools and the Catholic school teachers. And you just made a great comment. The teacher has to be all in. And that is what has given my kids a great experience. How do you combat that wage gap?
So I was a Catholic school teacher, and like I said, I still am. Trying to raise a family, working at my father's liquor store, on weekends, because I actually was the manager of my father's liquor store at night. Had to stop doing that so I could be a Catholic school teacher because I was so excited. Took a tremendous pay cut to do that. and then continue to teach and do what I loved while working. And so I know this very well. I think first and foremost, we have to show a deep respect for these men and women who choose to serve in this ministry.
Right.
Most of them are not doing it because they know they're going to get wealthy. With that said, we must do everything in the church's power to raise those salaries. So when I was the principal, I fought for those teachers. I spoke up at principals meetings. I spoke to that superintendent or, had conversations with the bishop. When I was superintendent, I knew then I was in the right spot to be that vehicle for our teachers. Mm-hmm. And it's not that we're trying to get to a certain amount. There's not an end goal there, but what can we do? And if we can, we need to do it. And we need to show evidence of that we're not just idly saying, yeah, we know it's a problem, but they're going to work anyway.
Right.
They're going to come, that is the wrong philosophy. And I think our teachers, when they see their principals and their superintendent standing up for them, they understand that they're not going to get a $50,000 raise. They're not going to get a bonus at the end of the year for doing a good job like most companies would do. Mm-hmm. But if they see that respect and they see that people care about them and that they're working to lower the cost of benefits, if that's humanly possible today, or navigate some bonus. A lot of Catholic schools now, for example, of something that's pretty new, that's growing, is sending Catholic school teachers to Italy or to Spain, depending on the charism.
The professional development side of things.
Through ministry.
Through ministry.
And so they're raising funds, making endowments. Mm-hmm. That's a way to say, we thank you for this ministry. We want to send you to that spot that directly relates to our teachers are like, look at that. I get to go to Europe for free.
Right.
And for my job, for my ministry. And so when you see these things happening, teachers tend to say, okay, I knew it going in, but we can never rest and say it's okay, because it's not okay.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts there, Rich?
Yeah, look, I think having served on a couple of high school boards over the years, obviously the last 10 or 11 years connecting with the superintendent's office in the diocese, I've seen a lot. And I think there's kind of two pieces here in Louisville. I think there's the sort of the high schools kind of led with this issue probably 15 years ago in terms of starting to get better increases in pay to their teachers. Now, one of the barometers or measures was, all those grids and JCPS and that. But schools like St. X, like Sacred Heart, those two that I were on, were not as much about getting to a certain percentile as they were, what kind of an economic pathway are we creating for our teachers?
Sure.
And how do we communicate to them that we are going to bat for them, if you will?
Sure. And
we're figuring out a way to pay for it. So it wasn't, you couldn't, at the high school level, you can't just say, well, we're going to raise tuition 8% and we're going to pay our teachers 8%. Because that's unsustainable,
right?
In any diocese. So you have to figure out other ways to finance those kinds of things. Fundraising, for example, is a big deal in the high schools, some of which goes to trying to make the economics around teaching there better.
Right.
Now, the grade schools, I would say in the last 10 years, have stepped up to the issue in a more meaningful way, in the same kind of thing. The good news, at least in the last 4 years in the diocese, our enrollments have grown.
Right.
So the best way to kind of fix your ship, if you will, is to get more enrollment
Sure.
in your building. And many of our schools, and the vast majority of our schools, have seen enrollment growth. So that creates an economy of scale by which teachers can get better rates of pay within the given tuition structure, if you will. So we're seeing that too. And that, to me, longer term, that's a big part of this whole issue is we got to get more kids in Catholic schools.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so Daryl, I don't know if we've gotten here yet. How did you end up at the Catholic University of America?
It's a crazy story.
Another one where you said yes, I'm assuming.
Oh, yeah, I did say yes. I still can't believe it. So in Indiana, the 5 Catholic dioceses work together on multiple things. One of them was accreditation. And we were using a secular accreditation at the time, and it really did help elevate our Catholic school.
Okay.
But we wanted something where Jesus Christ is in the center of all that we do. It was really important for us. And so I was the founding chair of this Indiana Catholic School Consortium. The consortium was all the 5 dioceses. We all did the same accreditation, and we were looking to potentially start our own. We were thinking of building our own. And then one of the superintendents contacts me and says, Dr. Hagan, I think you should know Catholic U has a Catholic accreditation. I was like, wow, how do I not know that? And he goes, so you're going to call, right? And I said, I'll call. And so I call, and Sister Mary Agnes answers the phone. It's a Saturday. And I didn't think she'd answer the phone, but I thought it said call. And so I thought I'll just take a chance because, my schedule next week was crazy. I don't know why I called. I called on a Saturday. She answers. We're having a confusing, conflicting conversation because I'm asking, I'd like the information about the accreditation that's completed. She's trying to tell me the institute just launched. Accreditation hasn't even started because it hasn't been built. We have a very long conversation, and she says to me, again, planting seeds, Daryl, I think you should apply for this job. I said, I don't know what job you're talking about.
Right.
I don't know anything
Not
about
why I
that.
called.
This is not why I called. I don't know of any job. She goes, we're hiring a director and an associate director to build this, whatever this accreditation is going to look like. I'll leave the rest of it alone, but I ended up being the director.
Okay.
When was this,
Wow.
2022 or thereabouts?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. 3 years ago.
So I'm not even real sure that I am familiar, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are not real familiar with what Catholic U is.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the school itself and why it's so unique?
It is very unique, and I encourage my university to continue to share this story. The Catholic University of America is the national university of our Catholic Church here in the United States.
Okay.
It's the only university that is the national university. Others out there think they are.
So you thought it was Notre Dame?
I didn't say that. I love Notre Dame.
A lot of people would.
I love Notre Dame. Kevin Baxter, go Notre Dame. But we are the only university that is founded and sponsored by the bishops. And this is very key as we talk about the work of the Institute in a few minutes. There's about 5,000 students, over 5,000 students. It's a designated R1 research institute. That's important because I believe, if my facts are correct, only about 4% of the universities have reached level R1. We just announced AI programs for undergraduate and graduate, and here's why that's important. AI is here.
Yep.
AI has been here, but people think it's brand new. And we need the Catholic University to do what they do, which is to help us navigate the challenges of today through the lens of our faith. So you will see these undergraduate and graduate programs, but through the lens of the church. So we're going to help them. Yes, here's how to build an AI, but here's how to do it through the lens of our church. Not to mention, it's located in the heart of D.C. The Basilica, our beautiful Basilica, is right there on campus. The JP2 Shrine is across the street. The Dominican House of Study is right across the street. The thing that I found, most people believe, oh yeah, Catholic U, that's where priests go for tribunal training.
Right.
but kids actually go there. Now, not only do they go there, we're Division III sports, but our boys just were in the Elite Eight of Division III. I know it's Division III. I know I'm in the Commonwealth of Kentucky.
Yeah, if you want to start talking basketball, you may.
And by the way, Pope did a great job this year. I'll throw that in there.
Okay, UK fan over here, Rich.
Did a great job.
Go Cats.
Building from nothing. But
so did Pat Kelsey, by the way. just want to throw that in there. So did Pat Kelsey.
And so, I think I wish. My son chose Marian University in Indianapolis.
Yep.
We love Marian University. I have a Marian University license plate. Go Knights! And but I could have, had I known more about that, I could have seen that been an option for my children that I might have encouraged more had I known. Not to mention, they have a class about introducing them to DC. And so you get to go and do all these great experiences, cool. Get in places that are closed after. There are so many wonderful experiences right there in the heart of DC if you within a Catholic experience.
Sounds like a pretty special place.
It is.
It really is. It's beautiful. It's stunningly beautiful.
So, and Daryl, you just alluded to this, but Rich, we've talked on the show about Catholic identity of our schools, and the purpose that's required by everyone to make that happen. What do you see when you visit our schools, and as far as Catholic identity is involved?
Yeah, look, I've been lucky enough to be in this job now 11 years, so I've visited schools numerous times over the years, and I would say, particularly under Dr. Bowling's leadership over these last 5 years, there's been what I would call an acceleration in emphasis around Catholic identity, and we use words like intentionality. You do things very intentionally around the gospel message in every subject matter, not just religion. In every sport, in every activity, there's some kind of intentional teaching going on around our Catholic faith, and I think I've been able to see that both from her office, and also I've seen it inside of our schools as well. There's again, I think we've always done a great job in the diocese around Catholic identity.
That's right.
And more and more of our kids are not Catholic by faith in our schools. And I think we've wisely taken note of that, if you will, but we've also not sort of compromised on what a Catholic school means and what it stands for. And I think that has led to a lot of great things in this community, particularly kids that once they discover the Catholic faith, guess what? They want to be part of it.
Amen.
And again, this is not any kind of an exercise of conversion, if you will, but it's an education. Yep. And a Catholic education is, in my experience, unmatched.
The conversion's a byproduct. It kind of just happens.
Correct.
Yeah, and I think there's lots of different kinds of schools around the world, but I think if you objectively kind of look around, particularly in the United States, you're going to see that Catholic schools are the best, and there's a reason for that.
Well, sounds like Daryl might be behind the curtain here, pulling some of these strings for the accreditation. So here recently, the Institute recently launched a national kindergarten through 12th grade Catholic school accreditation process. Describe that for us, Daryl, and tell us what's new about this approach.
I'm so happy to share this with you, and I even have even better news. This is being launched in May, I think, this podcast. So in May, we will be announcing it is now early learning through 12th grade. So we have a whole early learning so that they can be accredited, because right now that's usually a separate...
That's even before kindergarten, right? So you're talking pre-K, 3-year-olds.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, preschool, pre-K, TK, across the country it's called various things. And so the Catholic University of America who, by the way, from 1912 through 1968 used to do this business. They called it a program of affiliation. And every Catholic high school in the country, every Catholic junior college had to go through this program of affiliation. So when we say it's new, we really say this is just chapter 2 of something that the national university was already expected to be doing and kind of lost their way there in the 70s and 80s and 90s, and now we're bringing it back and we're seeing such great success. It's called Lumen Accreditation. Lumen Accreditation.
Okay.
You hear it here first, and it is spreading across the country. We are in today 424 schools / early learning programs in 10 different states within 18 arch or regular dioceses. And Lumen Accreditation does exactly what we want for our Catholic schools. We want our schools to be authentically Catholic, and we want the process of improvement to be permeated with Jesus Christ at the center, not somebody that's over here added on the side where it's accepted, welcomed, but it's not there. And here's what I mean by that. We start with a retreat. We have a phenomenal retreat with one of the Dominican priests who had helped us, the Dominican sisters at St. Cecilia in Nashville.
Yep, we know them.
Yeah, they are a big part of how this retreat got there. It starts with the mission given to us by the Holy Trinity, which was then given to the Great Commission, given to the apostles, to the church, to the school, to you and I. And so it's actually become like the cornerstone of an accreditation process. We are the only accreditation process in the world that I know of today that starts with a retreat.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because, again, we need to center ourselves with prayer. And we need every Catholic teacher, every cafeteria manager, every principal, every secretary to understand that they are the apostolate to what they're doing in their day-to-day ministry at that Catholic school. From there, we do use the NSBECs, the National Standards and Benchmarks for Catholic Schools, who are now owned by NCEA. But we felt there needed to be more than just the standards. So we took the church documents with a lot of help from, like I said, the sisters, the Dominicans, just a lot, and a lot of superintendents, principals across this country. We narrowed them down, and we have a discernment process because we think that our teachers need to discern what is God calling your Catholic school to do. How can your Catholic school build upon that charism? And so we have a phenomenal software. We spent thousands and thousands of dollars making sure that this software works. We did not build it. Fusati, a Catholic company, shout out to Fusati, has built this from the ground up. And it makes it so much easier for our principals, our associate superintendents, and our superintendents to navigate knowing where their schools are in their progress. We do on-site visits just like all other accrediting companies. And we do this through the lens of our Catholic faith. Lumen is accredited by what's called NCPSA, the National Catholic Private School Accreditors Association. So we're even accredited. We're great with the College Board. We're great with, if you, from Homeland Security, if you're bringing students in, we're on that list from other countries. Lumen is a standalone. We don't need one of the regional accreditors. Lumen stands alone because it's exactly what is being called for by our bishops today to be in our Catholic schools, who better to accredit and advance Catholic education in this country than the Catholic University of America through Lumen accreditation.
Wow.
So that would be, so now you're in the process of sort of spreading the word and growing the product, if you will. How big do you think this thing could be in terms of the process and how many people use the process?
I think we had seat belts put on us because the people that came before me that designed okay, here's what it might look like. Not Lumen accreditation, but we think if you build whatever it is you're going to build, we want you to just have 70 schools the first year. And I ended up with 170 because the Archdiocese of Minneapolis-St. Paul, Archbishop Hebda, shout out to him, wanted his schools to be first. And he had 91 schools. So just that one alone knocked me knocked me over. And we are going to England this June to speak at the Global Researchers Advancing Education Conference, GRACE Conference. So we will be presenting Lumen to the world, and I think Lumen will be international as well very, very soon. Wow. I believe it's not necessarily the work we're doing. I think we are presenting something that there is already a need, and we're filling a vacuum because this is for us, some states, like the Florida Catholic Conference, has built their own, and it's very, very good. Mary Camp does a wonderful job there in Florida, and some other states do things, but there were 35 states that have nothing, and so they must rely on a secular accreditor to accredit their schools because, like in Indiana, there wasn't a choice. Indiana now, 4 out of the 5 dioceses are already fully on board, and like I said, we're excited and looking forward to rolling out the early learning portion as well.
It's crazy. That's awesome. Boy, it's a huge gig you've undertaken there, though, Daryl. That's quite remarkable.
So what's the end product look like? Let's suppose you go through this process for 4 or 5 years at a particular school. What do you think comes out of it?
So this is what we hope comes out of it. It's a 6-year cycle from the start to the finish. Mm-hmm. Within that 6-year cycle, you'll have your preparation year. You will have the second year, your on-site visit. Mm-hmm. You will then have what we call progress reports, progress briefings. And we're not talking about things you type up that no one reads. And where you put all this work, the principal spends hours and hours gathering all this, and then somebody just says, oh, okay. We're talking about conversations because we know that principal may be new or that superintendent may be new. And so we don't want all those years to go by, so we're going to be checking in. But at the end of the day, you get renewal priorities. And it's those renewal priorities that's the answer to your question. Have you made progress, or have you had to pivot on some of those renewal priorities, which we're okay with if you have the evidence to support it. But the growth is what we're looking for. And because there isn't an end goal, but what we hope is, and that these renewal priorities will ensure that everything is permeated with our faith, that the 3rd grade science class, that the PE teacher, that the financial, that the enrollment, that the marketing, that the operational, so that your cultural, your operational, your intellectual, and your spiritual are all part of those renewal priorities, and that you're really doing what God has called that Catholic school to do. You'll see that school on fire and really just living the mission.
And it's the way I look at it, it's sort of like accountability around constant improvement.
Correct.
That's what to me, that's what kind of comes out of this thing. And we talk about that a lot in this diocese, a process of constant improvement. That's one of the things that's very visible in our schools, and I think it's showing itself very well.
Daryl, you've dedicated your life to Catholic education. Why do you think it's important to society? And is there a growing need for it?
You know, I think that's an excellent question. I think Catholic schools are as needed today as they were 20 years ago, 50 years ago. There was a different challenge in each one of those time periods. You know, when they very first started, I think there was, we want to make sure that our children are being raised in the faith and not contrary to the faith. When our Catholic schools first started, when bishops called for every parish to have a Catholic school, I think that our Catholic schools continually rise up to meet the current challenges faced. And I think it's no secret that there are challenges that need to be faced today. One of the things that we have to be careful about, our children are not widgets. We're not educating our children for a certain skill. That's a misnomer if you're in a Catholic school. We're not trying to, we love to talk about we're college ready or skill ready, but that's really not what we do. We're here to educate the entire human being. If we educate that person to want to be with Christ and then to serve others, that's the goal, right? We want our children to have encounters with Jesus during that time with us.
You bet.
We want them to understand the service that comes with being, if you're someone that has encounters with Christ, you're going to want to serve others. We want children to be of mind to think about what's true, what's beauty, and what's goodness. Truth, beauty, and goodness. And if the rest of that will work itself out, if we can do that, and we give them a sound education in reading and in math and in science and social studies and technology, if you're a school that's using technology, and you do that with that lens of being with Christ and how can I use my God-given talents to serve others, the rest of that works itself out. And then you've raised professional people, both white-collar and blue-collar people, who then will bring that to their place of work, to their place of employment, regardless of whether that's a waitress or the CEO of a company, of a healthcare company.
There you go.
Rich, I did my homework.
You did indeed.
Daryl, I'm curious. You just made the comment, if you're a school that's using technology, in your opinion, do you believe a school has to have a blend in today's day and age?
That's a loaded question with my current job.
I understand that.
And so what Lumen does, I'll tell you what our Lumen accreditation does. We respect the charisms of all Catholic schools. So if we're accrediting a Catholic school that feels that is not something that's in their charism, that's not hurt you. It doesn't hurt you in our accreditation.
Got it.
Those standards are as needed within the decisions at with your local ordinary.
Got it.
And so I respect that. For my children and for my grandchildren, I actually want them to use it, but I want them to be taught how to use it and why to use it. I want them to know what it means to use AI and how to do that through the ministry of the church, and to know the pitfalls, and to know that, yes, there are these pitfalls, but I could talk about Jesus Christ on social media. I could talk about, I think there's the other side of that as well. And so I want them to be, again, prepared to how do they use that, but
Great answer.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. And I'm glad you answered it that way, but that's a great answer. So, Rich, I don't know if you've heard this, but Daryl will be receiving the prestigious President's Award at the annual meeting of the National Catholic Education Association. How cool is that?
It's very cool. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Well, let's just say,
Congratulations.
well, thank you. When the president of NCA called me, I thought he was going to ask me to serve on a committee. I
Which
really
you would
did.
have said yes to. Well, we all know this now.
I was
There's a theme
begrudgingly thinking how, like, I could see it. It said Steve Cheeseman. Sorry, Steve. And I just was like, and so when he tells me, I said, well, I didn't think you were going to say that, because I have been attending this convention, gosh, since the early 90s, maybe late 80s. My first one was Anaheim, California, and I never once thought that would ever be something. So I wonder if they're running out of people to give it to. I also, I'm a Kentucky boy through and through, and I love to say, I don't think they think I'm really from Kentucky. I think they think I'm from Washington, D.C. So maybe that's how I got it.
That's awesome.
And I got 2 more weeks before they find out I'm from Kentucky or find out that really it's me.
What's a great honor.
It is a great honor, and it's such a cool event. Something I've been to several times. So really awesome to hear that you're receiving that. It's super cool.
Thank you. I will. Let me just say also, if I receive this, and I am going to be receiving it, but it is only a collection of all the people that I was with. Like I might be the one accepting it, but it's on behalf of those teachers, counselors, principals, pastors, bishops, superintendents, parents, all these people that I have journeyed with all these years.
Which is what a good leader would say.
But it's true. I mean,
Well, and it's very true in the Catholic community.
It is.
Okay?
It
that
really
that
is.
sense of community and sort of dependability on one another is
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah, that's the backbone.
Yeah, it is.
Dr. Hagan, we can't thank you enough for taking time to be with us, and congratulations again on your very accomplished career in Catholic education. And Rich, as every Catholic school family in need now knows, at the Catholic Education Foundation,
The answer is yes.
yes. Please say yes.
thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Daryl. Thank you very much.
Thank you.